love the heroic stories of marriage equality, essentially tracking the marriage equality movement since 2004. Been a number of award-winning writings on this subject from our guest. How about it for the great John Casey, everyone? Yeah. Senior editor of The Advocate. Wow, these are busy times for the gay rights movement. And I feel as though I have so much to ask you about in such a short time. But let's comment and get your thoughts on that which has been historically a great success, which is marriage equality. I mean, it was a long battle. You can give us some sense of that. And then tell us, I guess the book memorializes very specific stories within the overall issue of marriage equality. Is that right, John?
Yeah, that's correct, Mark. First, thanks for having me. The book was a labor of love for my co-author, Frankeny, and she had been starting collecting stories, marriage stories since 2004. And so she brought me on when the book started to kick into high gear, and we were signed by Rizzoli, a great publisher. The book has about 100 stories of people who were an integral part of the marriage equality fight. And so I was privileged enough to be able to speak to a number of those people who are featured in the book and write about their stories.
Yeah, the court decision at the Supreme Court level, which really decided the law of the land, is this Overfell decision. You can speak to what it involved, but you actually talked to Overfell in the book.
Yes, so Jim is on the book, and Jim has become a very close friend. And, I think what Jim does is really represent what all of the people featured in the book, most of the people featured in the book are, and that is they were everyday Americans, everyday human beings, and they were in love with their partner, and they wanted that love to be recognized lawfully. Jim's partner was dying of ALS, and so Jim and his partner fought the courts in Ohio. They won a few, they lost a few, but they eventually went to the Supreme Court, and I think more than 20 other plaintiffs joined their case. And the court ruled on June 25th, 2015, which was 10 years ago, that marriage equality was the law of the land. Lately, we've been, at least for me too, I've been hearing from a lot of the readers of The Advocate who are worried about their own marriages, because not only have Thomas and Alito on the Supreme Court, but you have a Republican-controlled Congress who can certainly overturn the codification of marriage equality that Nancy Pelosi, somebody I know very well, said was her biggest achievement in Congress.
Yeah, this is really brings me to my anxiety on behalf of what's right and wrong, and on behalf of the gay community. I mean, there's no reason that the gay community shouldn't have access to these same freedoms and customs that the rest of society has. And that is what you've just alluded to, which is that the hard-fought victory, which you're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of, is now, it seems inconceivable, but a victory that may be reversed. And so the vigilance that you have to have, what I'm curious about is, what is the system within the gay community? You as a writer on so many issues associated with the gay freedoms, I'm wondering how those anxieties play out in terms of public policy and vigilance on the part of your community.
Well, that's the key, is vigilance. And I was privileged to sit on a panel with Lieutenant Tom Carpenter, who had, and he was featured in an MSNBC documentary. That was the panel we were on when MSNBC debuted. And Colonel Carpenter was integral in the fight. So somebody got up and asked him a question, and they said, we've got equal rights, we've got LGBTQ people in the military, we have freedom to marry. What's our next frontier? And he said, there is no next frontier. And this was back before Trump was elected. He said, we have to be vigilant. We have to be vigilant and be ready to fight, because in a stroke of a pen, all of the freedoms we've won over the last 50 years could be taken away from us.
Yeah, and it's funny that a lot of these freedoms that we've seen taken away through the years, they start around the edges, and then before you know it, it's happened. Here, it felt as though it was really a broadside. Again, taking nothing away from the victory and the celebration that one should have for 10 years of marriage equality, but just cutting, ahead in the movie to the fact that you have a new administration which seems very comfortable, and as you suggest, sort of buoyed by GOP intransigence on this issue to begin with. They had to kind of be dragged kicking and screaming to this. It seems as though the gay community and marriage equality, among other things, broadsided. I mean, it's all happening at one time.
Yeah, and I think the key to that, and you said it, is around the fringes, and that same holds true for getting something like marriage equality passed. And it actually started, over 50 years ago. And I spoke to the first recognized couple that was married in 1972. And when the Overfell decision was made by the courts, they recognized Michael and Jack's marriage of retroactive to 1972. But I asked them, I said, what happened to you guys? They're in their late 70s, they're sort of retired. If the Supreme Court came along and nullified gay marriage or turned it back to the states, and they said, we don't care. They can't take away our marriage license. What are they going to do to the millions of people who have already been married? And society as a whole has seen that marriage equality, gay marriage did not have the effect of watering down or belittling straight heterosexual marriage. It actually solidified families around the country. Gay couples are now in neighborhoods and every part of communities around the country. People have seen them, their neighbors have seen them, they work with them, they go to school, PTA meetings together, their kids play together, and they see it's just normal. So it's so far entrenched in society over these last 10 years that it would really be, I think, a slight to so many people, I'm set in the heterosexual community, to see that those rights taken away. That's something that I think even, Republicans in the polls have been really strong on that, don't want to see that. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but again, people don't want to see that.
I just feel as though one of the great things that's happened through the years is that the gay community, out of the shadows, and the gay community is embraced increasingly by the mainstream straight community. Again, this is, I'm just a mainstream straighter, so I can kind of comment on that part of it. And I see that, people finally are ready to say, yeah, my brother's gay, my hairdresser's gay, my, my therapist is gay, whatever it might be. It could be, and as you just said, everywhere, because there's no specific difference between the gay community and the straight community apart from the sexuality. So I see that playing out, and I'm hoping that what you've said, I fervently hope that what you said is that in regard to the polling, in regard to public support, is something that's respected by lawmakers, because it wouldn't have seemed possible to me to get rid of those serving in the military heroically and honorably for any number of reasons associated with sexuality, but that's exactly what's happening now. And I worry that then, as we were just saying, from the edges to the center, that could kick the door open for a lot more. And all of a sudden it becomes okay, to get rid of and to deny rights for this community.
Well, that's what's happening in the military right now. I mean, they've gone full throttle after trans members of the military, and they're not going to stop there. Pete Hegseth has already said in his past that there should not be queer people in the military. So the deal is this, and they chip away slowly, that they get rid of the trans members of the military, which is actually a national security threat on many reasons. And then they chip away at the LGB on that end. And it's detrimental not only to the morale of the service members, but it also singles out, if the defense secretary has you in the target, has the LGBTQ community in his sights, and you're starting to be looked at as something different or an outlier, that feeds into bullying and harassment. And back in the days when gay service members were beaten up in back alleys.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And it sort of becomes self-enforcing that way. But let me get back to, but I think this is all instructive because the memorialized nature of the success stories that you have in your book, these can inform the present and do inform the present, which is why I think your book is so very relevant. I mean, it's wondrous to think that this is a victory. I mean, so hard fought, like so many of these kinds of victories, but it can also inform what's going on now. Tell me about some of the other people to whom you've sort of turned focus with the book, Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality.
Sure. So I mentioned Jack and Michael, who were the first to be recognized as being queer couple to be married. But I also didn't speak. I wrote about the two men back in the 80s who moved to a place called Silver Lake in California. They were both sick with AIDS. And there was a documentary about them, The View from Silver Lake. And it was about these two men who had an immense love for each other, and they cared for each other as they were sick and dying of AIDS. And they eventually both died. The documentary is searing, but love is the first word of this book. And that's for a reason, because that is the thread that ties together each story in the book. And so you go to somebody like Jack and Michael in 1972, and then Mark and Tom, and then more recent weddings, like Neil Patrick Harris and David Berkta and others. The thread is love. And the one thing we wanted to do was to call out those things that the people who suffered from AIDS and died, and then those people who were fighting for real estate, for to be included on a will. All of these different components of marriage and the legal issues around marriage, people had to fight for. And then you go to a famous story. I had the opportunity to speak with Ellen DeGeneres, and when she came out in 1997, it ruined her career. Then she got the talk show. Talk show was doing very well, but she started to talk about Portia on the talk show, and the producer said, "You might want to stop doing that. People aren't ready to hear about your girlfriend." And she said, "No, people will listen to my story, and they're going to understand that this is the person who I love." And she did an enormous great thing by getting Middle America to accept gay marriage. And and she recognized that, and she appreciates the fact that as part of LGBTQ history, she's in there because she had a lot to do with people saying, if Ellen loves Portia and it's all about love, why are we fighting this?
Sure. And then you have so much wrapped up in that. I'm so glad that you referenced the fact that there's a sense of courage that one has to have to kind of swim upstream against the political currents or the cultural currents of the day. And Ellen, and I know she's become sort of an embattled figure with how she treats her staff, et cetera, but you've got to give her credit for swimming upstream against those cultural currents which were so strong.
Yeah, I think, sure. I even wrote a column about her when all of this stuff was coming out, and some of it was true a little bit, but that's not what she should be remembered for, and it's what she did. And that's actually, so her story, everybody knows who she is, but there were so many normal, regular people who fought had the courage to fight simply because they loved this person so much and they wanted that love to be recognized. And that was critical. If it wasn't for the love, there would have been no courage.
So well said. I lived in San Francisco through the 80s. Excuse me. So I saw all the greatness of the gay community, and a different kind of greatness as the gay community tried to enlist the support of the straight community and the broader community of all communities in the fight for funding, for awareness around AIDS. It just so happened that I was there for that decade, and I lost dear friends, journalists, award-winning journalists who went down to this awful scourge. But I mention it because, A, it informed a lot of sort of my sense of things, but also the way in which that movement had similar aspects to what you're talking about, which is the movement to maintain marriage equality and equality generally within the culture. You have to broaden the perspective to enlist the help of all of these other communities for something which shouldn't even be, we shouldn't have to take a meeting on it. It should just be understood. But nonetheless, you have to fight for it.
Right. And I just attended, I was invited to go with Speaker Pelosi to see an exhibit at World Pride in Washington, D.C. last month about the AIDS quilt. And there was an exhibit there. And so I went with the speaker, and they gave us a private tour, and the Gay Men's Chorus sang for us. The Gay Men's Chorus lost over 50 members during the AIDS crisis. The quilts that were hanging there, the panels from the quilts that were there, were from 1987, which was the first year that I worked on Capitol Hill back in the late 80s. So Nancy Pelosi and I started on the Hill at the same time, 1987. And it was 1987 when the quilt made its first appearance on the National Mall. And the stories are haunting, and the stories need to be kept alive and need to be told. And you're right. It was the people like ACT UP, people who were dying, whose friends and family saw how horrible this was, but they also got a glimpse into the fact that these men who were dying were also partners of somebody. They were in love with somebody. And the AIDS crisis was a terrible thing that should never be forgotten about. And this generation needs to be informed. But it was the way of fighting for the research money. And it was that fight that enabled much change to happen. And it's that fight also that should be used as an example for our community right now to see how we have to dig in and fight, and we have to be in it together.
So well said. So well put. There is the AIDS quilt. Look how huge it was. The other thing that I remember, and the images are just so moving, I remember the families. It's not just those who had a loved one, had a connection, had what would have been a wife, husband, partner, spouse, whatever you want to put, whatever title. But my point is the families, to see these, again, mainstream families with the gay son or gay daughter or gay son and daughter. I mean, it was the breadth of America, all of the greatness of America touched by the scourge of AIDS. Just as you've said, the courage that was summoned for that battle was summoned for this marriage equality battle, and you chronicle it in your book, but it's also, again, we note repeatedly, the battle that has to be fought to maintain freedoms and to turn back this tide. I mean, it's a very kind of 1958 mentality that's kind of settling in over the country, and it's scary. I'm talking about from a Washington perspective, anyway. I mean, it's the Christian right. It's these political coalitions that are quite cruel to all of these minorities and the gay community among them. John.
Yeah, well, I talked to Dr. Fauci, talked to him a lot over the years, and he told me that he was instrumental in the fight for HIV and AIDS for treatment. I mean, he saved many, 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 many lives. But Dr. Fauci said he hasn't seen things this bad since the AIDS crisis, and he thinks it might even be worse. And I agree with them. I mean, well, you were talking about the fact that many of the men who died were from middle-class America who had their families and who had their friends. But there are still trans kids, still LGBTQ youth who are suffering so bad right now, who can't come out at home. And the suicide rates among them are skyrocketing versus those heterosexual kids. So the hate is still there. The reticence of coming out is still there. The fear of coming out is still there. And it's been manifested in things like what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida. When you single out these kids and you pass laws, and it's on the news, and it's on the web, and it's out there, these kids see that, and all it does is add fuel to the fire for other kids to pick on these kids and bully them. So when you said that things look like they're back from 1958, you're right. It's all of this hate, all of this legislation that's these state legislatures are passing, all they're doing is fuel the fires of hate and bullying. And you do take it back decades. Many people thought we were over that. I always hear from my friends like, well, more queer youth are coming out than ever before. That may be true, but the same holds true that there's more now who won't come out than there ever have been before.
I can so see the argument for why they wouldn't. And I similarly am appalled at the way that trans youth are being used politically. And I think the trans issue, I don't know a lot about the trans world. I have friends, of course, who have trans kids, but I'm saying I don't know enough to wade into however it should be handled. But I do know a political talking point when I see one, and it is being used as this cultural wedge issue to gain power without regard for the kids or the issue or anything. It's just really an area of political land that they can till until they are able to achieve power. So that compounds the tragedy because there's no real earnest conversation going on around these kids who are really in crises. Wow, we talked about a lot of stuff, John. It's kind of what my hope was to get into some other stuff, and you've really done it well. I wish we had more time. The book is Love, The Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality. And John Casey, again, talks to so many who helped establish the Marriage Equality Act as law, including Jim Overfell, co-authored the foreword to this book. And, so many great things in the LGBTQ plus community, and you've been part of so much of it. I mean, it really is a great credit. What a life, John. I know it never ends, but it's nice to talk to you because I have mad respect for all the work you've done.
Well, I appreciate you having me, Mark. I'm happy to come back anytime, and thank you so much for pushing this book forward. The stories are so critical and so important.
We're going to link to the book under this video, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, John Casey. John Casey, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Right on, my friend. Right on. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.